Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. We get together every week in order to share stories of service. We are a Rotary Club and dedicated to making the world a better place. Our motto is across the world is service above self. And our club in particular is interested in finding innovative, entrepreneurial, and educational ways to make service something that lives in the hearts of anyone who is a part of our club, who's a visitor to our club, who's inspired by the messages we seek to share. We seek to share these messages that come to us from people all over the world. We are able to connect with people in different places, record their talks to us about the work they're doing. We look for people doing inspiring things in order to inspire each other. I want to introduce our speaker, but before I do, I'll make sure that you have met the two members of our club who are also taking part in tonight's recording. So you'll see below Shags Chagrin, our membership chair. Wave Shags. Wave. Thank you, sir. And John Lozano, one of our charter members, and a gifted photographer, an educator, and a person working with Children's International Student Volunteers. John, I hope I got that one right. A program that helps children learn all kinds of leadership programs. Our speaker this week is Lowell Sheppard. Lowell is in Japan and is the Asia Pacific Director for Hope International Development Agency. He is involved in all sorts of programs designed to help the poorest of the poor. As you'll hear about it, the focus of extending compassion to the neglected poor. And he also has a background in other things. He rides across countries. We just got him back from a ride in Southeast Asia. And he is a member of the Royal Geographic Society. He's a published author, and has been part of Hope International Development Agency for the last 25 years. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome this week's speaker, Lowell Sheppard.
Great. Thank you for that grand welcome.
Well, tell us about the Hope International Development Agency. So I know that there are a number of different kind of similarly named organizations out there, but your agency focuses on what?
Well, we're concerned with extending compassion to the neglected poor. The word neglected is very critical to us, so we typically work in areas where other NGOs are not. That usually means in rural areas. We're active in about 20 countries around the world, and we've been in those localities for a long time. We will be there for a long time because we're committed to lasting outcomes and solid relationships. Typically, our work begins with communities in creating access to clean water. It's amazing. It's stating the obvious. I know Rotary around the world has been involved in a lot of water projects too in these communities. Water, once people have access to clean water, it's transformative. They then can have a reason to hope for the future, plan for the future. So then we make available capital, microcredit. We encourage entrepreneurship. We're involved in education and schools. And I've just spent 2 weeks riding around Cambodia on a bicycle with a group of supporters from Canada, all businessmen who wanted to see where their money was going. So I said, that's great. They're all keen cyclists. And I was impressed once again, just the amazing entrepreneurial spirit that these women particularly have in rural Cambodia. Typically in Cambodia, they are sub $150 a year. If you were to monetize the food they forage for and have their kids work for, etc. Usually within a year of getting access to clean water, which is in the form of a shallow well around which we cluster a well user group of 5 or 6 families, typically they're up the equivalent of $1,000 a year. That makes a huge difference. They are then self-reliant. They can now determine the course that they take. So I love my work with Hope. It's the most fulfilling thing I do. I've done other things in my life. My wife supports me what I'm doing, which is good because there's no money in this. although I am on staff and I get paid, but it's my wife's business allows me to pursue this great calling and vocation.
Very cool. Well, when you think about kind of the opportunity that you have to work on something that your heart orients you to do, one of the things that I understand about Hope International is that the idea is on getting people to be self-reliant, right? So if you would speak to that a bit, what is it about the orientation of your organization that generates that in people, that gives people that opportunity to truly be self-reliant?
Well, a key word is sustainability. It's a related word to self-reliance. And we believe for a project to be sustainable, the problem has to be discerned locally, and the solution has to be designed locally. Now, in the context of a relationship, of course, we're in conversation with our partners, and we shape each other's understanding of both the problem and the solution, but there has to be local ownership. Where bucket loads of money are brought in with ideas, people will take the money and take the ideas, but it doesn't make it sustainable, nor does it enhance dignity of those who are poor. So if we're criticized at times in Hope, we're criticized for moving too slowly rather than quickly, but that's because we need to move at the speed at which people claim local ownership. The well is a gift, and but what we find with even starting off as a gift, it puts in this DNA of giving. So once these families then become self-reliant, they themselves become givers as well. Let me just give you a little example on the education front too, where sometimes we have to work with a tension between a supporter and those in need. A friend of mine owns out of Japan, but now in the States and in Canada too, owns a growing number of international kindergartens. And he wanted to build a school in Cambodia. Well, we do 5 or 6 schools a year in Cambodia because when there's a critical mass of enough families can now afford to send their kids to school, there's no tuition charges, but you have to pay for textbooks and uniforms, so the poor can't afford to go to school. But when there's a critical mass, we build these schools with the agreement with the Ministry of Education that once the school is built by the community, they'll put in the teacher. So my friend Wayne Kim of Kinder Kids said, I want to put in a school, but I believe in school lunch programs. Protein is needed for learning, and there's not enough protein in the developing world for children. So I'm not sure whether that's my phone ringing or somebody else's ringing, or is it just at my end? In any case, sorry about that.
It's all right. The ringing of a phone can only last so long.
Okay.
That's kind of my thinking about it.
But, so Wayne wanted to fund the school lunch program for up to 5 years, and we said the problem with that is you're creating dependence. You're asking somebody from the outside to be constantly sending money in. So we worked with our local partners and this local school. And a problem in Cambodia is that teachers only get paid $50 a month. So they often have to go off and find other work. Therefore, the school is closed the majority of the time because the teachers aren't there. So very simply, our local Khmer woman who worked with Hope said what we should do is start a garden program, put in a well in the school, give the teachers responsibility for the gardens, let them grow vegetables and chickens, and now what is happening is this. They're providing food for the school lunch program. They're sourcing locally. They're selling enough surplus vegetables and chickens to pay for cooks, for local ladies. Plus, in full agreement and transparency with the Ministry of Education, they're now being able to supplement their teacher's salary, which means that they're not having to leave for weeks on end to work someplace else. So that school lunch program, and I was with them again last week, it's a self-reliant school. It's self-supporting. It's not relying on continued aid from coming from the outside. And incidentally, we had a nutritionist visit that school in October for an assessment, and she has visited many schools in Cambodia. And she said the energy levels, the focus levels, and even the height of the children were all higher at that school than at other schools. So here's a donor who had a good intention, but was going about it the wrong way, but was willing to listen to local people discerning the problem and designing a solution that was sustainable and self-reliant. And there's this great model for us to replicate now.
So when we talk about making something replicable, all right, you've got this kind of focus where you start with making sure people have clean water. There's kind of a clear basis for that being the sine qua non for having a successful community, and then building based on the needs of the community from there. This is happening not just in Cambodia, but I understand that you are in Africa as well and in the Americas. Where are the long-term projects that Hope International Development Agency has been involved in?
Well, again, we're in over 20 countries. I think to highlight the few, we started in Ethiopia back in the late 70s, and we've been there ever since, working particularly in southern Ethiopia. And there it's clean water as well, but rather than shallow wells, it's capping springs and creating water pipelines with the view of putting a water pointer tap within a 5-minute walk of everybody in a village. And a village could be kilometers long. And then there's education, microcredit, etc. So Ethiopia is a focus. Cambodia is a focus. We were in 1994, just when the peace accords were signed, and have been in Pursat province ever since. Dominican Republic, we've been involved in also since the late 70s. And we're to the point in Dominican Republic, for example, where we're basically now, with all of our friends there, saying this entire patch of Dominican Republic over towards the Haitian border and this long valley, it's pretty well there now. It's now the work that needs to go on is outside Hope's mandate, and it's self-determining. In Cambodia, in Pursat province, the Ministry of Agriculture told us last year they had started doing baseline surveys 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, the population of Pursat was 400,000. 320,000 were under $1 a day. Today, the population is 460-something thousand, which means there's migration back to the province, and child mortality rates have improved. And those under $1 a day is 122,000. So we are doing ourselves out of a job, which is a great trajectory to be on. That's why we're committed to the long term. And I would say this about Hope too: we are a development agency, not an emergency aid agency. So, and I don't say this critically of those who do, but we're not storm chasers. So we don't follow the trail in after disaster someplace. Some organizations are good at that. They are emergency responders. That's not our deal. However, where there is a disaster, where we already are, and our friends have been affected, we do respond. And that's why in Tohoku, when the tsunami and the earthquake happened now almost 5 years ago, just in a few weeks' time, we'll be celebrating, or I should say, remembering that 5-year anniversary. Many of our Hope supporters here said, you got to get up to into the tsunami zone. And we said, well, but that's not us. But they said, but you have experience. And I said, but only where we work and where we have friends. And they quite rightly pointed out, but this is your community. You're in Japan, so we're your friends. And so within 6 days, from about 8 different sources, $2.5 million was given to us in the Japan office that said, get up to Tohoku, just do up there what you do elsewhere. Build relationships, be involved in long-term recovery. And we're still there to this day, although we've never had to ask for money for Tohoku, because we're able to use this sum of money to enable us to do what we do. So sometimes we are involved in disaster relief, but that's only in the context of where we have friends and where we, as in Japan, already part of. So I kind of dare stray off from the core questions you asked me. I apologize.
That happens. I mean, no worries there. Speaking of questions, I think, John, you've got one. So, John, go ahead and kick in.
Thank you. That's some great information. It sounds like you're doing some great work all over the world. The question is, how is it that is determined where you go or where Hope International is located? You said 20 different countries, or I mean, how is it determined where you go? Or, and with that said, I'm an educator as well. What would we be telling people who might want to help Hope International? Like, what is the type of work they would be doing? Or I'm sure it's varied, but how do you determine where you go, or what kinds of programs do you? Is it just water? Is it sustainable development? Is it, as you said, it's not disaster relief, but what would be some of the programs that you focus on?
Two great questions. On the first question, there is a history to every location where we're at. We, like many other NGOs, receive requests all the time. We need help, can you help us? And we have to, unfortunately, say to almost all of them, I'm sorry, we're already committed where we are. We have no extra available resources. But over the years, we have gone into new places, and the reasons usually have been in relationships. Sometimes that's been with government. For example, in Cambodia, Canada was one of the participating countries who helped broker the peace deal. As a result, the Canadian government asked us, because our head office is in Vancouver, or U.S. Minister to be precise, asked us to go as part of the Canadian Commission, and we were assigned Pursat Province to be involved in water infrastructure. So, and of course, they also seeded that with money. We had to raise some matching private donations. So that's the reason we're there. But we're still there, and it's been a long time since we received any government funding, because we're very careful about making the initial commitment, because we know we cannot pull back from it. Similarly, in Ethiopia, we were asked by some American friends back in the 70s, come and see the famine in Ethiopia, see if you can help. So I had 3 of my friends, all Canadians, went. They were the founders of Hope and said, yeah, we will help. We need to do that in a Canadian way. And as a result, Hope was started. We're in Afghanistan. We're in Afghanistan because an Afghan Canadian walked into our office one day over 10 years ago and said, I want to help my people. He was from a particularly marginalized tribe in the Northeast, and persecuted by every regime that's been in Afghanistan. And he says, I want girls to go to school. I want clean water. I want to make capital available, microcredit available. And so we said to him, well, let's talk. You're part of our community here. It was a slow process. He was able to raise money from the Afghan community in Vancouver. We agreed to partner with him. And then he now commutes back and forth. And we now have a school of 1,200 students. Boys go in the morning, 600 girls in the afternoon. So those are kind of 3 examples of how we ended up into places, but we don't go in and out quickly. Our concern is to help the poor become self-reliant. So typically that does always start with clean water, and typically it does lead on to education. and it does lead on to creating an environment where they can become entrepreneurs, many times agricultural entrepreneurs, to make a living. In terms of volunteers going overseas, sometimes we have to send specialists to audit, to monitor, to do feasibility studies. But we're a great believer in also sending short-term teams over, not because, and I would use Yokohama International School as an example. They just returned from Cambodia, where they've been going for 10 years, helping to build schools. They raise the money for the school, then they go over and they spend a little time helping building it. The people in Cambodia don't need physical laborers to come to Cambodia and help them build a school. But our work programs is really, it's more like it's a study tour. We call it UNION, which is a rather corny acronym we coined back in the 80s that stands for Understanding Needs in Other Nations. But it's really meant to come alongside and, yeah, paint the walls, lay some bricks, mix some cement, but not because they need our help to do that, but because it enables these students from Yokohama International School to learn and to appreciate what the poor go through.
I think Shags has a comment for us as well, so let me pass it over to you.
Not so much a comment, but a question. Have you partnered with Rotary clubs directly for their financial and their hands-on support? These are the types of programs that they like to get involved in.
Yes, we have Rotary clubs across Canada, sometimes the International Foundation. We have partnered with Rotary clubs in the field as well, because oftentimes that's a criteria for a Rotary club, say in the US or Canada, needs to link with a Rotary club there. And also a few years ago, one of the first e-Rotary clubs that a friend of mine was then chairman of, Herman Ehrlich, who was then GM of the Osaka Hilton and now is GM of the Conrad in Bangkok. He led the charge, and that particular Rotary Club raised about $40,000 for wells in Cambodia. So we've had a very good relationship with Rotaries over the year, not so much institutionally, although we're both institutions, but it's really because of people and friendships within Rotaries, and the DNA of Rotary is service, and that's ours too.
As a matter of fact, the very first Rotary community service program was to build women's restrooms in downtown Chicago so that there would be a comfort facility for them and encourage them to stay downtown and shop more.
Wow, I never heard that before.
Yep.
Wow.
From Rotary Club number 1.
Interesting. That was what year?
Well, one of the things about Rotary's history and kind of what you're doing is that Rotary started as an opportunity for people in Chicago. Paul Harris brought 3 friends together, and they from kind of different business backgrounds, and they decided they would kind of go from business place to business place in order to meet once a week and to talk about kind of their work and service and these kinds of things. Hence Rotary, right? But it was focused, and Rotary has stayed focused on a lot of different kinds of service for 111 years now, right? But one thing that is always important in making sure that charity has a truly kind of effective kind of reach is knowing what you can and can't do. You were speaking earlier about we've been asked to do this, we've been asked to do this, we've been asked to do this, but we have to know that the pieces are in place, that we're a part of that community, that they have the needs that we can help meet initially and set in motion things that are important. I think this is something we've heard a lot in kind of the world of giving over the past several years, where people have stopped, kind of just asking for money for support for X or Y or Z, and more about things like microcredit and the Grameen Bank, and making sure that this is actually beginning to create infrastructure for economies and such. I had a member contact me just in the last few days saying, what are we going to do about this project over, or this issue over here? And it was one of those things where it was like, that's not a part of what we do. We can care, we can try to reach out in different ways, but being focused in order to be effective seems to be something that people are talking about more and more. It sounds like this has been a part of Hope's focus from the beginning.
Yeah, and it's very much shaped by mission and values. And also, I would add to what you just said that I think I'm a firm believer that we all have a vantage point from where we can help. And it's from that vantage point that we gather our focus. And so I can do things that you can't do, and you can do things that I can't do. It's stating the obvious, but there's such a profound truth to that. And so, for example, I had some people come to me asking for advice after the tsunami came, and they were criticizing this person for, what they're doing is they're making T-shirts and sending the proceeds to the Red Cross, and this person was doing that, and they were saying, well, is that really the best thing that we should be doing, selling T-shirts? I said, but the guy's got a T-shirt business. I mean, that's what he can do, and we can only respond from our particular vantage point, but at the same time learn to how we can then use our vantage point most effectively and in a focused way.
Yeah, you talked earlier about the importance of really understanding, how people in a given place where the effort is there to help are a part of choosing what needs to happen, so that there'll be some long term to these things, and it won't just kind of come up and go away, right? Reminds me of a video that the Facebook people put out, I think, at one point about somebody trying to help a group of students who were having trouble getting getting to school because it was very, they had to walk through water to get there. So they're like, we're going to get these guys boats, right? And they bought the boats, and and that allowed them to get to the school just fine. But when the tide was out in the afternoon, they had to get back. It was just what now, right? And so kudos to you guys for making sure that what you do is kind of built within a larger system that makes sense.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to tell you a little anecdote from last week. I was with a lady last week in Cambodia. She and her family are due to get their well in April. We're doing about 250 wells over in this current 2-year cycle. And so she's been screened, she's been through all the process, very, very poor family. And I'd already met her twice before, and I knew her story, but I had these cyclists go by. And we know that once she gets her well, which she will have a well within 6 weeks, it's going to change her life within 6 months. But her husband got very sick because right next door to them, 3 meters away, there's a cassava farm owned by a distant landowner, and they used chemical pesticides and fertilizers. Seeped into the ditch, they drank the water, husband got very, very sick, almost died. She borrowed money from the village moneylender, $100, 6 months ago at 25% interest per month. So calculate whatever that is up to now, a few hundred, was it $250, I think she currently owes. And I knew this already, and I knew that within a year she'd probably be able to start paying that back because she'd have the well, she'd be making a surplus of income, a surplus of vegetables she could sell for income. Well, a good friend of mine who was with me, who's the president of a IT company in Vancouver, he immediately said to my colleague in Cambodia, come here for a private chat. She came over, and Andrew took out of his pocket $250 to eliminate the loan for the lady. And as he's doing it, I'm thinking two things. Number one, this is breaking the rules. This should not happen. And And then one of the reasons it shouldn't happen because it's the easy thing to do, and there's an immediate gratification for the donor. You know, you can get hooked on being a nice guy. You know, so and the lady, when she received it, she actually took her shoes off and was going to get down on her knees and kiss his feet. He wouldn't let her do it, but there was that immediate gratification he got, and that's part of the reason why he shouldn't have done it, because he should be thinking about the bigger picture. This is the Hope way. We do things thoughtfully, methodically. But at the same time, he did what he should have done. He had the means to eliminate this debt, that was had criminal level interest levels, and he was able to do it. What's $250 to him? And he's not going to go back to her and then cause her to ingratiate herself to him for the rest of her life. She will never see him again. And so it's one of those illustrations that sometimes you even have to, you know, from your vantage point, if you can help somebody and only you can help them, why wouldn't you do that? And he did it. And I said to him later, Andrew, you broke the rules, but I trust your heart, and you changed that lady's life. Now they don't have to worry about that obscene interest rate every month that's being compounded.
Yeah, I see a comment from Shags talking about, you know, another approach in a situation like that would have been to take over the loan and you know, to pay it off and then say, okay, well, you now owe me, but give a much more reasonable interest rate. So I think there's a lot of different ways to come at these things.
And you know what? He did say that later, that night around our campfire.
Huh.
And he's saying, you know, I came believing in wells, but that experience for me changed my perspective. I still believe in clean water, but we've got to get capital available to these people through low interest loans.
Wonderful. Well,
So, yeah.
Unfortunately, we've hit kind of our time on this, and I apologize because there's any number of kind of possibilities going forward. But I'll wind our things down and then give you kind of the last word as we like to do each week. But for all of our members and guests who've taken part in this in this meeting and are watching this recording as the program, make sure that you let us know you were here. There's an attendance survey just a little bit down the webpage from where you're watching this now. Let us know. If you're a visiting Rotarian and you put in your email address right, then you're going to get an email that you can pass along to your club secretary, which can be used as a makeup for a missed meeting. And we believe that every Rotarian can be a 100% attender by the benefit of the flexibility of something like the E-Club of Silicon Valley, SiliconValleyRotary.com, and come and join us as often as you're able. You know, we love sharing the stories of people getting out and making a difference. The other thing we want you to do is to tell us your thoughts. So as you go to the very end of the page, you're going to see what we call the Discuss section, DISQUS. You can create an account very quickly. You can use Facebook to log in, a number of other kind of options. And by doing that, you're sharing your thoughts. Every week we want to know what people think. What did they think of the program? What did they think of the other pieces of the meeting? How can we get better at what we do? We love feedback that allows us to work to improve, because we think we have plenty of room for improvement, and we welcome the opportunity to kind of make that move in wonderful directions. I want to thank Shags for being part today, and John as well, and especially to our speaker, Lowell in Japan. And Lowell, I want to give you the last word.
Well, hey, well, thank you. You know what? We're relationally oriented. We have friends all over the world, and one of our friends who was in Japan is now in Silicon Valley, and he's organizing our very first Hope Gala at Palo Alto. I think it's the Rosewood Sandhill on June the 7th. I'll be in town for it. If anybody wants to join, you can go to the link, which I think may appear down here someplace. And even if you can't come, I'd be happy. It'd be great to meet up for coffee with anybody who happens to live in Silicon Valley. I know that many members here are from around the world. And I think my lasting word is, again, it can sound the obvious thing to say, but it drives me in what I do in my life. It doesn't take much for us to make a difference in somebody else's life. So do what we can.
Amen. Lowell, thanks again. And we look forward to having you here in June. Stay on the line. We're going to finish the broadcast. For all of those who have been watching, we look forward to seeing you again next week.